Hey folks, Ryan here. Just wanted to give a little preface to this initial episode of our podcast. We have since changed the name of this podcast from The Transition, which is what it's going to go by in episode 1, to the Climate Careers Podcast, which we think will be a little bit more easily searchable on the onlines. So just wanted to make sure we knew about this confusing change in names, and we expect you'll still get the same value about how to switch your career into climate tech regardless. So enjoy and look forward to a name change in episode 2. Welcome to The Transition, the podcast for anyone wanting to focus their careers on tackling the 21st century's most daunting challenge, climate change. I'm your host, Ryan Dunphy. I'm a current social impact MBA student at Boston University's Questrom School of Business. Now, the first inkling I ever had that we humans might not be in the healthiest balance with the natural world came as a kid, when I found the rotting carcass of an abandoned car in the woods behind my New Hampshire home. In response, short on options at 8 years old, I bugged my parents about recycling. My first quote-unquote environmental job was as an environmental proctor in high school, where I begged classmates to do a better job of, shocker, recycling. What you could even do about the environment at that time felt pretty limited. But in the years since, I've pressured universities to invest their endowments more sustainably, built and funded carbon offset projects in South America, including a biodiesel converter, solar kitchens, and some truly amateurish greenhouses that represent the low point of my carpentry career. I've reported on climate and environmental issues, performed company lighting retrofits and cheer-led employee carpool challenges, organized around state, local, and national elections, lobbied for better climate policy, and in my last job on Sierra Club's digital innovation team, helped the folks doing that work make better use of data and technology to engage volunteer activists. Now, after some aptitude tests and a lot of introspection, I'm at BU in business school, very intentionally working to transition into climate tech. You can just see in my own work history the huge variety of ways in which you can try and tackle a big, complex issue like climate change. Now that climate is on the forefront of so many of our minds, if you're trying to contribute by shifting your career to focus on it, and it should come as no surprise that I strongly urge you to do so, you're faced with a simply dizzying array of organizations and job roles. So in this podcast, in The Transition, we'll hear from a variety of folks in climate tech, clean energy, and sustainability on how they evolved into their current roles, what challenges they're tackling in their day-to-day, what kind of person is the best fit for that work, and what skills you might need to pick up to realize that fit. In doing so, I hope to demystify this new world a little bit so you can successfully steer your career into a new climate-focused direction that makes the most of your talents, knowledge, and experience and leaves you deeply satisfied. Today, I'm excited for you to join my conversation with Lucyann Murray. Lucyann and I both know each other from that South American part of my career. We were both chasing good skiing in the summer down there. And she now works as a management consulting senior manager in Accenture's Natural Resources practice. If you're an MBA student or a senior in college, you may be seeing the flurry of invites from Accenture and other big consulting firms to apply for internships and positions right now. So we wanted to dive in and see how these big firms are evolving to tackling the climate crisis. Lucyann, welcome to The Transition, our podcast for climate job seekers. I wonder if you could just start by introducing yourself.
Sure. Hello. Hey, Ryan. Hey, everyone. My name is Lucyann. I am a senior manager at Accenture, and I am working to build sustainability for our resources industries, which is chemicals, natural resources, mining, metals, forest products, utilities, and oil and gas.
Sweet. So I'm trying to start these with a couple icebreaker questions that are kind of get to know you. So I'm curious, are you a pen or pencil and why?
Oh, definitely pencil. Because I like the fail fast methodology that when you start writing, you can erase it. I'm not a perfectionist on the first go.
Oh, lovely. I love it. Would you want to go to space, the bottom of the ocean, or neither?
Probably neither. I don't really want to drown and I don't really want to suffocate. So
Interesting. All right, cool. And then for our final icebreaker, if you were able to retire tomorrow, what would you fill your time with?
So I've been thinking about this a lot. I would really love to start a horse leadership for executives business.
Yeah.
And I would love to bring all the C-suite executives from some of the major companies and have them learn how to lead horses. Because
Oh,
when you lead a
interesting.
horse, you don't want to look at the horse. So you literally can't go forward if you're looking backwards. So some really interesting lessons to learn.
Wow. Metaphor in the physical realm. I love it.
Yeah.
Lovely. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. So I know you're a senior consultant at Accenture. You've been on a journey to kind of get there, trying to find your way kind of on to do, have an impact in sustainability. So I'm curious if you could kind of go back and bring us to how you got here. Like what was that decision tree look like?
Yeah, sure. So I graduated from my MBA and my master's of forestry about 4 years ago. And when I was there, I was convinced I was going to go into real asset private equity. I probably wasn't going to go into consulting. I was going to take my own path and I was going to help the trees be more sustainable and maybe get people to start buying carbon credits. I kind of stumbled upon conversations with Accenture. And as I think I asked for like 9 conversations, right? Because Accenture is a 550,000 person company. It's huge.
Right,
And I
right.
was like, well, I want to talk to this person. I want to see like, how can I put my master's of forestry to use? Because I know my MBA will be put to use, but I really have this tie to the land. And nine conversations later, I wound up founding this little group called Chemicals and Natural Resources. And we work with forest products, metals and mining, and chemicals companies. And so that's how I found my way here. Thought I'd give it a go.
Wow. And what was kind of sustainability consulting? Was there sustainability consulting at that point, or was like, where was it when you entered Accenture, your first couple days there?
There was. So we've always had a central sustainability services group in the US. Traditionally, that group has focused mostly on consumer products, goods, and retail. And I think that's where it was when I was joining. And so when I said, well, hey, do we work with land use? The answer was not really right now. So I thought, well, maybe I'll take this back door and I'll figure out how to work with land use and then get to sustainability from there. Because they're in my opinion, the companies that are using the land the most are the ones that need sustainability the most, because that is a
Mm.
very finite resource on our earth.
So what was your first year like there? What were your clients and what were you doing?
It was shocking. I ended up spending a year at a copper mine. I was at the site every week working with supervisors. I think the word sustainability made me a hippie yuppie. I think as soon as I told them I had a Subaru, that I was resident hippie at the copper mine.
Because
So
what, those resident truck was like a Ram 1500 or something, or?
yeah, Ford Raptors were really popular.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up working in the mine with supervisors. I was driving around in trucks. I was actually teaching them how to use a tool and learning how it could be best add value in operation. So a lot of it was learning and listening, and then some of it was saying, well, hey, with this digital tool, how could you do your job better? And then helping them come up with solutions to figure out how the tool might be used to help make their jobs easier for them. And if you think of the tool, it was like, I don't know, like a smart home, like a Google
Hmm.
Home for a mine.
Yeah,
So like IoT. So nothing to do with sustainability. I was purely making production happen.
wild. And what was your, like, going in, what was your thought about, like, oh, this is who the people are going to be like, this is what a mine's like, and what was your, like, wow, this is totally different learning?
I was really nervous because I don't know, I was nervous about whether I would be accepted. I was nervous about whether I could make a difference. I don't have a mining background. I didn't even know what a mine looked like until I
Mm,
started Accenture. So I was mostly nervous about all of those things, which actually caused me to take this approach of listening first.
mm.
And I think that was actually a really good approach because I've got to say, like, even though I may be doing more sustainability work now, that is probably one of my best experiences because the friends I ended up making at the mine site are friends I will probably keep for life. We had so much fun just talking in the hallways and
Yeah.
riding around in the trucks, and most of it was during work hours. Like hardly any of it was after work hours, and it was probably one of the most eye-opening experiences, that there were just these really amazing people that were doing these things. And like I had a pretty, coming out of environmental school, I was like, oh, mining, like that's really extractive, that's really damaging.
Right.
But it caused me to reflect, like everything I owned had something mined in it. So it, like, you got, like, if it's not farmed, it's mined. And that's literally true.
Right. And I'm curious, like, so going into a mine, like hamming it up with a bunch of guys who are driving around in Raptors and whatnot is not probably what anyone who's thinking about this crush of consulting interviews coming into like an MBA program, that's probably not what their vision is. How close does that resemble the kind of average consultant day job?
I would say it probably doesn't resemble the average consulting day job. I think that a lot of times when you're coming in strategy consulting, especially, you're going to be spending a lot of time with the C-suite. So this was I was in the weeds, in operations, as a young female. I think all of those things were kind of unique.
Yeah.
But I loved it. Like I and that's kind of what I was looking for. I was like, I want to be boots on the ground, because I knew I loved being in the forest, helping with the forestry and the logging. So if I could get as close to that as possible, that's what I was looking for. So I would say I sought it out a little bit, but it was definitely worth seeking out.
Yeah. And so for folks who are looking for that kind of like active, get in the weeds, like see what's going on and not necessarily be thinking on a 35,000 foot level strategy consulting, but really get into the nuts and bolts of it. Like, what should folks be looking for when they're like evaluating companies or roles?
Yeah, I think asking those questions, because generally, like, I think the people that do get in the weeds really appreciate people who want to get in the weeds. And I know when we're looking to staff projects, like a bonus for us is just like someone's really excited about it. And often that's the first barrier, because it's kind of tough, right? Like I was there every week. I had to fly 2 hours, drive 2 hours, and I slept an hour away from the site. So I was driving 2 hours daily. So it was a hustle.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'd do it again, but it was great.
So your role is like evolved now, and how would you describe like how your work and maybe by extension of that, like the sustainability consulting practice at Accenture has evolved, or that group, the Chemical and Natural Resources group, has evolved in your couple of years since you kind of got in the door?
Yeah, so I think it started, I mean, I was always passionate about sustainability. That's how I came in. And I think it started with thought leadership, right? Like kind of what you're doing now is just having people talk about it, bringing it to the market. I wrote a couple papers about sustainability. I have one out there called Reinventing Forest Products. It's about sustainability in the forest products industry. And then I ended up doing one on mining. And then soon enough, there was demand. And then because my name was in the market and I had spent all this time thinking about it, the next step was for me to start putting all of the pieces together and connecting the dots of how we could actually make this happen for our clients.
Interesting. And so what's the kind of work that you're doing now different from what you were doing then? Or is there a different approach to how, someone like Accenture is like thinking about sustainability? I mean, obviously I would expect there's a lot more companies who are looking for that expertise right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd say, like, as you get more senior in a consulting company, it's a double-edged sword, because you have the opportunity to make more impact and to grow business. But then at the same time, you kind of move a little bit further away from the cool experiences on the site.
Right.
So I've ended up in a place where I am driving the growth of our sustainability practice for our heavy asset industries, which are chemicals and natural resources. And I'd say in the last 2 years is when we saw the shift, which it was definitely correlated with COVID. I think it's a number of things. So one, it's definitely investor pressure, right? And especially working in the mining industry, when you have people like BlackRock saying, we're not going to invest in coal, that's going to affect mining companies. And then it's that plus regulatory, the Biden administration and some of the regulations around emissions. And then the third piece is consumer demand. So like I mean, I know I went off the chain in what I was buying off Amazon during
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah.
And my paper box inventory grew really tall, and
Yeah.
you need the infrastructure to support that.
Right.
So I think there's, it's a combination of like opportunity, regulation, and pressure.
Interesting. So now going back to that mining company with our guys in the Raptors and everything, like what are the problems they're trying to solve now with regards to sustainability? And yeah, like what are you helping them kind of figure out?
Yeah, so they have a really interesting problem because they produce copper. And when you think about copper, you don't always think about net zero, but copper is an essential material for an energy transition. So it's going to be in all types of infrastructure, like renewables. It's going to be in EVs. It's going to be in batteries. Like it's going to be everywhere. And so the mining companies, who historically have only sold to the market that's like, you're selling to a commodities market, you're not thinking about your customer at all, are now having to pivot to think about that. And when you think about the cars like the Teslas, who want to be net zero, they're going to need their scope 3 emissions to be net zero. So what does that force that mining company to do? How do they change to support that? And can they change in their traditional business model, or do they have to start looking at new business models like urban mining or agri mining, or any type of mining that gets something without, creating extractive holes in the ground?
Yeah, can you just pause and explain what agri-mining and urban mining was? Because I think the first time
Yeah,
you said that, I thought we were digging like a hole in the middle of the city. So
totally. So urban mining would be like digging for trash, and it would be trying to find metals out of that trash.
mhm.
And agri mining, which is actually really exciting, unsure of its scale potential, is some trees have metals in them. So like, for instance, poplar is a tree that takes up a lot of metals and has historically been used for tailings and mine sites. Now there's a theory that you could actually get metals out of their sap to be able to create metal products.
Wow, that's wild. So and are these, when you're thinking about, so you got your Tesla saying, okay, we got to reduce our scope 3 emissions, that's affecting the mining company who then is the scope 3 emissions in that little case you described. Where's the big impact that they're trying to address? Is it the equipment that's doing the extraction, or is it like you said, oh, we need to give up like open pit mining, and we need to, if we transition to agri mining, that's a way we're going to tackle our kind of net zero goal?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything. So you have to decarbonize your scope 1 and scope 2 to reach net zero. So that's in the mine. And you have to determine if you can do that. So can you reach net zero? A lot of these mining companies are pledging net zero by 2050. So can they do it through renewable energy, through electric equipment, through maybe autonomous equipment, more precise drilling and blasting? So it's a combination of all of these things, and then this analysis of whether you can reach it that way. And if you can't, how do you supplement that through changing the business model?
And what are some of the answers to those questions that are maybe in play now that weren't a couple of years ago?
Well, I'd say definitely autonomous mining. I think a couple companies are taking on autonomous haul trucks. And so that's also a safety play, right? You're getting people out of the mine and people out of dangerous way. The other thing is autonomous loading. So like when you're done mining and you're getting it onto a rail car, making sure that whole process is autonomous and saving energy in that way. A lot of other strategies are renewables. I'd say renewables are probably the first strategy for most companies, because mine sites are off grid, a lot of them. So how can you power your off grid sites with renewables? And I think a challenge is reliability, because that's your moneymaker. So how are you getting 24/7 production? And then on ones that are close to the grid, how can you supplement it with power purchase agreements? And I think that's where a lot are starting, because that's the biggest, lowest hanging fruit.
For you personally, kind of what has made consulting, or maybe even within that consulting in a bigger firm like Accenture, someplace you want to be kind of longer term? And I know a lot of folks go into consulting for a lot of different reasons, but I'm curious who the folks are who you found have stuck around for the long term and really enjoy the work, are successful, and find that's what they want to, that's the kind of work they want to do.
Yeah, and I totally wish there was a pattern. I'm not sure I found one. Um,
Interesting.
but
Yeah.
yeah, the thing that's worked for me is the space to be entrepreneurial, the people who I can do it with, and enough of a positive reward system, like clients buying, or
Mm-hmm.
just some positive reinforcement from the market that you're moving the right direction,
Right.
has been what's really made it for me. And I think most of all, having that space to create, because I was always worried coming into consulting. I am a bit more entrepreneurial. I was worried I wouldn't be able to tap into that.
Mm-hmm.
It might just be bureaucratic. But
Mm-hmm.
I guess, and that's the cool thing about consulting, I think, is that there's space for all different kinds of people to grow. So it's just, if you allow yourself to see the space
Yeah.
and follow through with it, because there have been a lot of pieces that are not enjoyable, but then you take your airline miles and your hotel miles and you get a upgrade at the Ritz in Tokyo, and you're like, okay, it was
Yeah.
kind of worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And so I'm curious too, to kind of wrap this up, like what's one thing folks should really know about consulting, especially at a big firm, before getting involved? And then what are like some knowledge bases or skill sets that folks should try and pick up if they want to get into consulting around energy and sustainability specifically?
Yeah, so a couple things. I'd say one is that, like I said, consulting isn't really uniform. So I think coming in with an idea of where you want to go is helpful. And I think that may be a key to success. And also, I think defining your non-negotiables. Like, what is it that you don't want to give up on? Because in something that isn't uniform, like, you could give up everything and then you end up
Mm,
with nothing. So
hmm.
for instance, like, non-negotiables for me were where I was living, because I knew that if I was happy with where I lived, I could find adventure outside of work, if
Hmm.
work wasn't going well for a while. And then the second piece was this industry piece. I knew I wanted to stay within these industries. I was willing to do whatever within those industries to move towards a goal, but
Yeah.
having that North Star in mind helped me a lot. And then in terms of skills, I mean, data is huge. So I think learning how to read data, talk about data, manipulate data, I think that's a really big skill, along with, like, learning the digital advances and the industry advances. So staying up to date on where industries are right now and what they're thinking about, and then also staying up to date on where digital strategies are taking them. And I mean, I'm a little biased because Accenture focuses heavily on digital, but
Right.
that's really helped me, is making sure I'm learning constantly about AI, machine learning,
Yeah.
all of the robotic process automation.
Yeah. Well, it seems like that's happening in tandem, right? Because you have,
Yeah,
when you get a Tesla, you're getting an electric vehicle and you're also getting a lot of innovation on potentially a self-driving car at the same time. So
totally.
I think they go a lot hand in hand. Wonderful. Well, that's all the questions I had today. Is there anything we missed that you wish you wanted to get out there for folks who are thinking about getting into the space?
Yeah, I would just say, maybe don't be so deterred by whatever preconceived notion you have about consulting, because I really do think you can create your own path. So keeping that in mind, and not thinking that the system's going to take you away.
Right.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for making some time for me on this beautiful
cool.
Thursday. Thanks so much to Lucyann for her time today, and to you all for joining us for our chat. Looking forward to getting more of these episodes out in the open in the weeks to come. Thanks for listening. The Transition is supported by the Boston University Innovation Seed Grant Program and is edited by Katie Cooney.